10-minute Torah. Can't do it in 10 minutes. Goodness. He can do some of it. In fact, in going through this portion, Parashat Korach, it's number 16, or chapter 16 through 18. Man, what an action-packed, like portion, right? Like you've got the rebellion of Korah, almost a rebellion that you could say is in the name of equality. And then you have like the ground opening up and swallowing up him and some of them, and fire coming out and consuming some of the rebellious, and then even a plague coming and just sweeping through the people in an action-packed part where Aaron's running through the people as the plague is killing people, and he's running, and he's standing in the way, and with burning incense, with the correct censer, right? Because they had the 250 censers that were brought before God, and they were rejected. They were they were burned up, and they took the censers, hammered them out, and made a covering for the altar. So it's just an action-packed time, right? If you're not reading this, boring. Like honestly, this is fun. I started looking into this, and I was just like, I couldn't even get past, for 10 minutes, I couldn't get past the first 15 verses. Which is really the meat of Korah and his rebellion. And it's interesting because what he says here, it sounds kind of like he's trying to be noble. He's emphasizing equality and shared holiness. He says, you've gone too far, in verse 3. You've gone too far. All the community is holy, all of them, and Adonai is with them. Then why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Adonai? Now Korach, understand that he's not some lowling, okay? He was a Kohathite, and they were like the highest ranked Levites. Okay, he was a Levite. He was one of the highest ranked Levites. They were responsible for carrying, and assembling the tabernacle, and they were high ranking. He wasn't low status, so he wasn't really doing this for the people. Okay, he was rising this rebellion because of his own heart. He was rising up against Moses and Aaron, really for personal elevation. And he was driven, though, through this. He masquerades it as justice or equality, but really he's doing it because he's driven by envy, ambition, and bitterness. And, this is, in Moses, what he does is he doesn't fight back. He falls on his face. And he lets God fight the fight. He lets God decide, hey, stand back. Maybe God wants someone else. Maybe I'm not the right one. Humbles himself. And he allows this time to come, this testing by God. And God chooses ultimately. And so it's this, and then you see this other piece of it. This other piece, which isn't as much of the equality thing, but now they're trying to reframe history, right? We have Dathan and Abiram, and they say that Moses took them out of a land flowing with milk and honey. Egypt. This is ridiculous. Only to kill them in the wilderness. They're the ones responsible for being in the wilderness, right? We just read that in chapter 14. They rejected God and his land, okay? The land that God had for them. And now they're trying to change and reframe history, right? They're trying to recast Egypt as this paradise and they're trying to blame Moses for their problems, their fate that they brought upon themselves. And it's, but this is interesting, though. We often see these rebellions that happen. This is modern. You see these rebellions that happen, and they include historical revision. They try to project blame on on those who are in power or whatever to justify their stance. You see this happens. But you know what? The Torah, it teaches, it doesn't teach equality in function, okay? It teaches equality in dignity, okay? We might be equal in worth, but we're not always going to have sameness of role. So interestingly, Korah, and I know I don't have much time, but we can't go too deep, okay? But I want to point something out. Korah is almost a mirror in his rebellion. He's almost a mirror of Lucifer, Hasatan. Because if you look at Jude, okay, in Jude chapter 1, verse 11, Jude mentions Korah. Now he also mentions Cain and Balaam. And Cain, of course, was his corrupt worship, jealousy. So Judah is using these men, these people, to explain these corrupt people that infiltrate the body of believers. And Cain, corrupt worship and jealousy, and Balaam has his greedy compromise and ambitions. And then you have Korah, rebellion against authority and divine order. Remember that. That's the key here, is that it's chosen by God, the order. And not everyone is going to be eligible for every position. You might all be equally holy in the body, but the body of Messiah has distinct parts. And it doesn't require identical roles, only obedience to the one who assigns them. So that's what Korach's issue was. He wasn't happy with his position, just like Lucifer wasn't happy with his position. He had a high position, yet he still rebelled and brought a rebellion against God. You see how this is a parallel? We see this. And that's what happens, is some aren't happy with their position, where they are, and what they've been given by God. And they fight against God, and they disrespect him, and they don't respect his authority to make those decisions. But it was Aaron who was chosen. And it wasn't Korah. And that ended in his destruction. Just like it will end in Lucifer or Hasatan's destruction, ultimately in the end.
To get the more details of what Jonathan's talking about, 1 o'clock, okay? Room 201 will be going deeper into that. Maybe Jonathan will even be there, right? Yeah, no, okay, thank you. that was good. Anyway, praise God. So we're for the good news portion, Besorah. We're in the Yochanan, John, the Gospel of John, chapter 9, and it goes 9, 10, and 11. And I'm gonna have to repeat what Jonathan said, because I got 40 minutes. I'm on a clock today, so okay. There is no way to even dig into this really deep. So I'm going to focus on chapter 9, okay? Hopefully you've read your portions. If you don't, there's a calendar out there. We have it. It's on the website. It's on there where you can read this portion. You should be reading ahead. It's a great portion. Chapter 9, we'll focus on today. 10 just adds into it, so much there in Yeshua. And then in chapter 11, it talks about the raising of Lazarus. It's a great portion. I'm going to read chapter 9, though. It's good to hear the Word of God, okay? Amen. We can teach on it, we can say comments on it, but we need to hear the Word. And so I'm going to read here in chapter 9. As Yeshua passed along, he saw a man blind from birth. His Talmudim asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, to cause him to be born blind? Yeshua answered, his blindness is due neither to his sin nor to that of his parents. It happened so that God's power might be seen at work in him. As long as it is day, we must keep doing the work of the one who sent me. The night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, put the mud on the man's eyes, and he said to him, go wash off in the pool of Shiloh. This means sent. So he went and washed and came away seeing. His neighbors, and those who previously had seen him begging, said, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, yes, he's the one. While others said, no, but he looks like him. However, he himself said, I'm the one. How were your eyes opened? They asked him. He answered, the man called Yeshua made mud, put it on my eyes, and told me to go to the pool of Shiloh and wash. And I went, and as soon as I had washed, I could see. They said to him, where is he? And they replied, I don't know. They took the man who had been blind to the Parashim, the Pharisees. Now the day on which Yeshua had made the mud and opened his eyes was a Sabbath. So the Parashim asked him again how he had become able to see, and he told them, he put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I can see. At this, some of the Parashim said, this man is not from God, because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. But the others said, how could a man who is a sinner do miracles like these? And there was a split among them. So once more, they spoke to the blind man. Since you're the one who has eyes he opened, and what do you say about him? He replied, he is a prophet. The Judeans, however, were unwilling to believe that he had formerly been blind, but could now see. Until they summoned the man's parents. They asked them, is this your son, whom you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? His parents answered, we know this is our son, and that he was born blind. But how is it that he can see now? We don't know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's old enough. He can speak for himself. The parents said this because they were afraid of the Judeans, for the Judeans had already agreed that anyone who acknowledged Yeshua as the Messiah would be banned from the synagogue. This is why his parents said, he's old enough, ask him. So a second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, swear to God that you will tell the truth. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, now I see. So they said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? I already told you, he answered, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Maybe you want to become his disciples? Then they railed at him. You may be his disciple, they said, but we are the Talmudim, we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't know where he's from. What a strange thing, the man answered, that you don't know where he's from, considering that he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but anyone who fears God and does his will, God does listen to him. In all of history, no one has ever heard of someone's opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't do a thing. Why? Who was born in sin, they retorted. Are you lecturing us? And they threw him out. Yeshua heard that they had thrown the man out. He found him and said, do you trust in the Son of Man? Sir, he answered, tell me who he is, so I can trust in him. Yeshua said to him, you have seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking with you now. Lord, I trust, he said, and he kneeled down in front of him. Yeshua said, it is the judge that I come into this world. To those who do not see might see, and those who do not see might become blind. Who do see might become blind. Some of the Parashim nearby heard this, and they said to him, so we're blind too, are we? Yeshua answered them, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But since you still say we see, your guilt remains. And I'm actually going to read the first verse in chapter 10. It says, yes, indeed, because it continues on here. I tell you, the person who doesn't enter the sheep pen through the door, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber. But the one who gets in through the gate is the sheep's own shepherd. This is the one the gatekeeper admits, and the sheep hears his voice. He calls his own sheep, each one by name, and leads them out. After taking out all that are his own, he goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they recognize his voice. They never follow a stranger, but will run away from him because strangers' voices are unfamiliar to him. And we'll continue on here a little bit, but that's setting it up. Now, this is the second time. I was up here 2 weeks ago, and I also got the story of the pool. It was a different pool. It was the pool of Bethsaida, and that was a little bit different. It was a man that had issue for 38 years, and remember, he was trying to get into the water. The legend was that the water would stir, and he's like, I can't get in there. No man will help me. And Yeshua, remember, heals him on a Sabbath, but he doesn't tell him to go into the water. And I think it's very interesting because the man's hope was in the water. The man's hope was in the structure. The man's hope was in the legend, whatever it may be. The man's hope was that if I could just get in the water. And Yeshua demonstrated who he was. It ain't the water. It ain't the system. It ain't that. It's me. He is the healer. He is the one. Here we see the opposite. This guy, there's nothing about the water. He's by the pool, but this is a different pool. This is a pool that you can actually go visit. The pool of Siloam, that means the scent. If you go to Israel and you can actually go to it, it's been dug out in phases. If you go through Hezekiah's tunnel through the city of David, you will come out at the end of it. But it was used anciently to for the Feast of Tabernacles stuff. They'd go draw the water from there and take it up to the temple. It was a source, and there's a lot of if you read a lot of the oral writings, there's a lot of Messianic tones to this pool. Okay, the one that was sent. Okay, and it has to do with the Feast of Tabernacles, with all the stuff that happened there. There was a lot of stuff. So it's interesting that Yeshua would do it at this pool. But let's back up, because this is important, I think. In chapter 8, verse 59, last week's portion, I'm going to start verse 57 because he had this run-in with the parashim there. And he says, why? You're not even 50 years old, the Judeans replied, and you have seen Abraham? Yeshua said to them, yes, indeed, before Abraham came into being, I am. At this, they picked up stones to throw at him, but Yeshua was hidden and left the temple grounds. Now we go in, if we didn't have a break in the chapters, it would say, as Yeshua passed along, he saw a man blind from birth. Two things here. One is, if you read the little thing, it was named, this parasha was named, he saw a man. Yeah, I was looking at it this week. I was looking at my little note. He saw a man. This is important. He saw a man. The other thing is that Yeshua was leaving. He just for his own life. They went to stone him. Okay, it says they picked up stones. There was an intense situation. They're going to stone him. It says he was hidden, whatever that means. And he's taking off. Okay, he's leaving. I can imagine they're probably walking quickly. Okay, they're like, okay, we're out of here. It's not time. They're walking, heading out of there because the crowd's upset. They got stones. They do all this. But it says as he passed along, so they're leaving the temple grounds. They're leaving that. They're going. I don't know how to describe it without a map, but if you've been to Israel, you'll know. Some of you have been there. You go through. He's coming by the pool, and he sees a blind. As he passed along, he saw a blind from birth. This is important because Yeshua's leaving quickly, but it's interesting that he still notices people in need. He still sees the need. He sees the man. He stops and takes care of it. His own life could be in danger, in a sense. I mean, he's Yeshua, so he's going to be whatever he did. But excuse me. by his own life could have been in danger, but he stopped. And it shows us sometimes in our busyness, sometimes in our things, even when we're trying to get from here to there in a quickly manner, or things aren't right in our own, because here they are going to Yeshua, sometimes we have to stop and take care of a need. This is part of being a disciple of our Messiah. It's not about me. It's about being a hand to the Lord. And so it teaches us here, if we are to be like the Messiah, if we are to be like him, we are to walk as him, there has to be. This doesn't mean we have to stop at everything. We don't see Yeshua, it's a misconception, we don't see Yeshua stopping and touching everybody, taking care of everybody's needs. But there was a man, you see. And I think, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. There are times when we're busy, we got an agenda, we're moving, I got to get here or there. But God pricks our heart, we see something, and it's time to take care of it. And we see Yeshua doing that. Now, this whole chapter begins with the physical blindness, but it's going to end with the spiritual blindness. And that's the thing that Yeshua will turn this around to, from a physical thing to a spiritual thing. But let's look at this. So he sees a man blind from birth. And I love the next verse. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, to cause him to be born blind? You have to admire the disciples here. I mean, they're very theological people, right? It's like, can you imagine Yeshua stops? I don't know what he was doing with this man. He's talking to him, and the first things that they talk about is a question. And it's not actually a bad question. The whole book of Job, if you want to look at it, is basically about this. You look at Job 1 and 2, I mean, you read the book of Job and read that long book, that's what it is. You must have done something. There must have been some sin in your life. There must have been this. There must have been that for these tragedies to happen. And there's other verses that sometimes lead to that. And so they're asking him a question here. But what I love about Yeshua doesn't engage in that at first. Yeshua answered, his blindness is due neither to his sin nor to that of his parents. It happened so that God's power might be seen at work in him. So Yeshua gives an answer, but his answer has to do with helping him and mercy and practical stuff. And a lot of times what happens is we see somebody, the misconception is that because someone's in trouble or someone has a sickness or someone's got something wrong with them, they must have sinned. There's groups that teach that. Now we understand original sin. I'm not discounting that. We know that everything that is wrong comes from original sin. Okay, we live in a fallen world. There's going to be things, but we see here from Scripture that just because someone comes down with something, the thing is, what did they do wrong? Why are they like that? Why is that financial? It doesn't have to be physical. Why all of a sudden they financial? What happened? They must have done something wrong. And we start judging, and we start going this theological thing and studying to do that. And sometimes it's just so that God can work. It's a very simple answer. So that God can work. Sometimes there has to be something in our life. This man was born blind. Sometimes there has to be things so that God can do work. Yeah. I take this personal because, as many of you know, I have a daughter who has many special needs. She's 22 years old. She still can't use the bathroom, okay, on that. And people question sometimes. Yes, there were some things that led to that, but on the other hand, it's God's sovereign. And but you know what? God gets all the glory. We get these questions sometimes. Like, what happened? And sometimes it can be hurtful. What happened? It must have been this or that or that or that. But also, on the other hand, I see that God gets the glory because there is such a tenderness and a kindness in that heart. And there are pains that we don't have to go through as a parent because that will always be a child. Yeah. We don't have to go through all those things. And we see that. And it's also taught me over the years to be kind and humble and to appreciate simple things like using the bathroom that I never appreciated before. Something that we would take as just common day stuff. Those things don't come common to everybody. So you have these kind of things theological things that people want to discuss and stuff, but our thing is like Yeshua deals with this, it's for the glory of God. And so he answered this, his blindness is due neither to his sin nor to that of his parents. It happens so that God's power might be seen at work in him. And then he says, as long as it is day, we must keep doing the work of the one who sent me. The night is coming when no one can work. Interesting statement too. As long as it is day, we must keep doing the work of the one who sent me. And this goes back to my premises. We are still here on this earth. We have work to do for our Messiah. Sometimes we get caught up, the days are getting darker, things are happening, and we just want to protect ourselves. We just want to run. I keep going that song again, but we learn how to be a medic, and then all we do is bandage ourselves. Yes, the days are getting dark. There's a lot of bad things going. We're getting closer and closer to the Messiah's return. We know what the book says. It's going to get worse in many aspects. But he also says that there will be a great movement among his people. There will be a great thing, and that's what we want to be. We want to be part of that. It's still daytime. We should be about doing our Master's business. As long as we are breathing, as long as we are here, as long as He's providing, we should be about doing His business. And what is that business? Just read the Gospels. He went around touching people's lives. And this is something we should be doing. Instead of hiding, because there will be a time, it says, when no one can, the night is coming when no one can work. There could be a time where we can't freely go out and share with people the good news. There could be a time where we can't gather together. But while it's day, while we have the freedom to gather together, we should gather together. While we have the things that we can go out and help people or do things or speak freely about the Lord, then do it. It's light. Because that day will come. And I look at it in the physical. As you're young, don't waste your youngness. There are things, as I get older, I say, I wish I would have done that. There's certain things I physically can't do that I used to be able to do, and you think, man, I wish I could do that. I just ain't got the strength to do that anymore. Use your youth. Use it for His glory. Use it for the things of His kingdom. Do those things while you can. Because there are a time when we can't do as much as we used to do. And so we see this on this. But he says, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. We see Yeshua with his lights here again. I'm the bread of life. He's the living water. And lastly, I am the resurrection and the life. And He is the light of the world. This is a common thing with John. He used it all the way back in 1. Lights entered the world. The darkness cannot comprehend it. Yeshua is referred to as the light on this. Two things about blindness. I'm going to read Psalm 146:8. This is really messianic. There's so many scriptures on this, but I'm just going to bring up two. Psalms 146, verse 8. It says, Adonai opens the eyes of the blind. Adonai lifts up those who are bent over. Adonai loves the righteous. But I want the Adonai opens the eyes of the blind. Then we go to Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 35. There's actually several references in Isaiah about the blind, and they're all messianic in Jeremiah. Isaiah 35, verse 5. If you, in context, most people probably know this, in 35:1, this is talking about the desert and the dry land will be glad. Thereof I will rejoice and blossom like the lily. It will birth. This is a very messianic psalm, talking about when Messiah comes back. And so we get to verse 5. It says, Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, the ears of the deaf will be unstopped, and the lame man will leap like a deer, and the mute person's tongue will sing. For in the desert springs will burst forth streams of water in the Arava, and it goes on from there. Verse 8, a highway will be there, a way called the way of holiness. So it's always been tied to the Messiah, that the Messiah, when He comes, He will open the eyes of the blind. And as the man said in the story here, he says, no man. Who's heard of this before? Again, Yeshua is showing who He is. He's healing the blind. And that, so you have Isaiah 35. Now, what's interesting, he says in verse 6 here, having said this, he spit on the ground, he made some mud with the saliva, put the mud on the man's eyes, and said to him, go wash off in the pool of Shiloh, that means the sins. So he went and washed and came away seeing. What a bizarre thing. Go back a few chapters, Yeshua just healed the man. Pick up your mat and walk. This shows us another thing, that God always doesn't do things the same way. We like to make patterns. He has to heal this way. He has to do it this way. We see that God does things different ways sometimes. He could have simply spoke the word, and he would have been healed. But he told the man, actually spits on the ground, he makes some mud, and he puts it on the man's eyes. Sort of a crazy thing. It's the same way. God tells people different things. Some people, he said, follow me. Leave all your stuff, leave your fishing boats there, and follow me. Others said, I want to follow you. And he says, no, go back to your town. This teaches us another application. What God is doing in your life, don't make that the standard for everybody's life. Sometimes God tells people different things. He might tell you to give up this and live like poorly. He might tell someone else, no, I don't want you to do that, but you can do it because I want you to be able to bless people with this. Okay? We have different paths sometimes. Sometimes God will heal people instantly. Sometimes he does it through different means. Sometimes it takes longer. The important thing is that what I'm trying to say is that God does things different. We go back, this reminds us of a story of Naaman. Y'all know the story in Kings where he was told to go dip in the Jordan, which was quite a thing of faith. If you ever see the Jordan River, you'll be like, yeah, you can see why he didn't want to get in it. It's dirty at many times. But anyway, he was told to go do that, and he did. Remember, first he sort of argued, well, he told you to go do it. He did, and he was healed. It's the same thing though here. It's very interesting. He spit on the ground and made mud with saliva. He put the mud on the man's eyes and said, go wash off in the pool. But when we see the man does, he listens to him. You don't even know who this man is yet, but in faith, he listens. And he goes and he just... Now I find this very interesting about the mud. I was trying to think, what is this about the mud? Mud, to me, it reminds me of Adamah, which is because it says the mud, the ground, where we get the word Adam, it's the dirt. Okay? The mud is dirt. It's taking us back to me at least, it's back to Adam. It's to do with mankind. It has to do with that. And what's interesting about the spit, I started thinking about the saliva. Where is saliva coming? It's coming from the mouth. It's the breath. It's the mouth. Okay? It's the stuff that Yeshua would do that, put that in the mud. To me, just in my mind, I was thinking of the earth, the Amadan, the physical, the spit, the saliva coming from the master's mouth, that's spoken, it's coming out of his mouth. In a sense, it's his breath. He's combining with the dirt. He's combining his heavenly with the earthly. And he's going to do it to bring healing. Now, you might disagree with that. That's the way I view it. I was trying to think. That was my symbolic of it. And to me, it's just quite amazing. He says, and then he gives them an instruction, go and wash in the pool. Sometimes God has us do strange things. And he has a way of doing things. But the man goes off and he washes. So it says, and he came about seeing. And then, of course, we have this whole debate. His neighbors and those who previously had been seen him begging, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? And others said, yeah, he's the one. Others said he looks like him. And it's an interesting whole thing. And then they say, how were your eyes open? They asked him. He answered, the man called Yeshua made mud and put it on my eyes and told me, go to the pool and wash. So I went, and as soon as I had washed, I could see. They said to him, where is he? And he replied, I don't know. So at this point, the man hasn't even seen Yeshua. Think about it. He's blind. He's just told to go to the pool and wash, and then Yeshua's not there. We see this progression in the man. In verse 11, he says Yeshua is a man. Because he says the man called Yeshua made mud. He just says, the man made Yeshua. It was mud. We go down, if we keep on going in verse 17, because now the Judeans get involved. It says they took the, I don't know if they did it to cause trouble or not. They took the man who had been blind to see the parashim, okay? Some people would view that as, oh, see, they wanted to cause trouble. Others, because you have to understand the culture back then. You went to the rabbis for everything, okay? The Pharisees, you went to them for everything. Everything. So it could be like, is this the Messiah? Is this, they brought up everything to them. But it's interesting, their response. Because it says next, the day on which Yeshua had made mud and opened his eyes was on the Sabbath. Now we got another problem. That's the first thing it brings up. So the Pharisees asked him how he had become, and he told them. And so the guy tells him again. He washed, he did this. And of course they said this man's not from God because he doesn't keep the Shabbat. I, at times, can be a parashim. I have been in my past. Many of us have. And one of the things I think that destroys our movement, we do want to call it Messianic movement, Hebrew roots movement, whatever you want to call this, okay, Saturday Keepers. One of the things that destroys us, I think, is the same attitude sometimes of judging people whether they're from God based on their actions on Shabbat. We understand that's why we're here, that Sabbath is a gift from God. Sabbath is a good thing. There's a blessing associated with it. But sometimes that becomes the all in all. It becomes a salvational issue. It becomes that. And this is where we run into danger. And sometimes people have something to rejoice about or do that, and we can be very critical because it involves around Shabbat. And this is probably one of the areas where we, I think, push people away more than anything. Especially new people when they're just beginning to learn about the Sabbath, and you hammer them over the head. You know, they just learn a little bit about Sabbath, they do it, they don't got it completely, they don't understand the 24 hours, and like, boom, hammer. No, you did what? Oh, bad, you know? Bad. And then they're just like, whoa, and it's too much. We must show grace, we must show mercy, because honestly, if we all go around and evaluate ourselves, we probably all have disagreements, and we probably all look down upon what we do on Shabbat. The way we approach it. Yeah. For some people, they don't even write on it. Or look at their emails, or look at their phones. Okay, every one of us has a little bit different standard. And what I say is, what God's put on your heart, what you want to do, then do it. And worry about yourself. Yeah. And bring others in to enjoy that and let them work it out with their family and all of that. But this is always the thing, and it's the same thing. It's no different than today. This is what causes the controversies. This is what causes most in a community like this. What can destroy, what can divide us, what can do that. Is sometimes what's done or not done on Shabbat. We have to be very careful to guard against that, especially when God's moving. If someone's rejoicing, rejoice with them. If God does something. And I love that God does. It's so interesting that He does so many healings. He does so much good stuff on the Sabbath. He's just got, look at that. Sabbath is a day for doing good. Sabbath is a time for healing because it's a rehearsal. If when we get to Yom Shekalot Shabbat, a time of all Shabbat, and the Scripture talks about there's going to be a time when there's no more weeping, there's no more sickness, there's no more death, there's no more pains, then why wouldn't those things happen on the weekly Shabbat at the rehearsals? Why wouldn't there be healings? Why wouldn't there be temporary things put aside on the Shabbat as far as healing and praying for and doing those things and doing good works? It's a foreshadow of what's to come. So to me, it's very beautiful that this thing happened on Shabbat. But let us not be ones like these. But so verse 17, he says, he is a prophet. This would be the second step in this man's progression. It's interesting because the second one he says, he's a prophet. Okay, he was a man, he's a prophet. So the Judeans, however, were unwilling to believe they had formerly been born blind. I mean, this is crazy. Yeah. They're going to question, this man? There's no way you were born blind. And sometimes we can get so bent on our religious life, okay, of our thing, but we can't even see clearly or understand how God is moving in people's lives. I've been there. There would be people who didn't even observe Shabbat that God was doing great things in their lives and doing that, and they go on Sunday, and I wouldn't even listen sometimes. Listen, I can't be. They don't understand the modim. But God was still working there. And we have to be able to listen. I was blind to those things. Very blind. And but now you can see, so he does this. In verse, so he goes on. They meet the parents. Is this your son? I mean, this is a crazy story. This is your son, you know. Let's do it. No one's rejoicing here. They're just like, we got to question this thoroughly. The parents, of course, he's old enough, ask him. And I love the man's thing here. In verse 25, he answered, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I was blind, now I see. That's a very important statement. And I understand this statement even in my own life, because I remember as a young man after I became a believer, trying to deal with the theological stuff. Is Yeshua really real? Especially in the studying the Judaism and stuff, and is he really that? And let's look at all the scriptures. Is he really the Messiah? Is he really this? Is he really that? I can sort of identify this because I say, I don't know. I don't know all the theological. I don't know all the words. I don't know how you understand all of that. But I do know this. I was a mess. I was an addict. I was a mess. I couldn't overcome anything. My life was messed up. And just by calling upon the God of heaven, the God of earth, the Messiah, my life was changed.
Amen.
That I do know. Yeah. I was not the same man. I was never the same person again. Every addiction was dried up. Everything was... So that's all I can testify. How do I explain that from the theological point? I couldn't. I didn't know how to. I still don't know how to. I still get messed up in those things. I can't explain it, but I do know what happened. And so I think that's an important thing. And for those who have had that experience, who know, have been born again, and if you haven't been, sometimes we search for the right answers and theological. Sometimes you just have to God and say, God, move in my life. Change me. Change me. Set me free from this junk. Set me free from it. Let me understand. We make it too hard sometimes. It's a simple call out to God, and he'll do that. So they said to him, what did he say to you? How did he open your eyes? And he's, going through this whole thing again. And I love this guy. This guy's actually really funny, I think, because he's like, you want to be his disciple too? It sounds like, you can be. So what's interesting is, now in verse 27, he says, maybe you want to become his Talmudim. He's admitting now, he says, I'm a disciple. Yes. He went from a man to a prophet to I am this man's disciple now. Which is very interesting. And then you go to verse 33. So they, first they railed on him. And in verse 33, he says, in all history, no one has ever heard of someone's opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't do anything. So now the man is going to Yeshua is from God. Saying, I don't know about this man, but nobody could do this without God's approval. So now he's recognizing that. And he goes on here, and these guys, well, of course, you were born in sin, they retorted, and you're lecturing us. And Yeshua heard that they had thrown the man out, and I love this, and Yeshua goes and finds him. Just like he did with the man with the mat. He went back and found him. And he says, he found him and said, do you trust in the Son of Man? Sir, he answered, tell me who he is so I can trust in him. Yeshua said to him, Lord, I have seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking with you now. And he says, Lord, I trust. And he said, he kneeled in front of him. So we see in these verses, he went from Yeshua is from God to Yeshua is the Son of God to Yeshua, I trust in you, to I will worship you. What a progression in this man's life. That he met this and he says, I'm going to even, he says, and he kneeled down in front of him. Other translations say, and he worshipped him. This man had this progression. It's the same thing in our own lives. Sometimes we just heard the stories of Yeshua. We just, we've heard it. Sometimes but we progress in understanding who he is. And it's a beautiful story. But here, Yeshua changes a little bit here. Because he says to him, it's not that it's the judge that I came into the world. Other places it says he didn't come to judge. You have to put in context. But so those who do not see might see, and those who do not see might become blind. Some of the pair of sheep nearby heard this and said to him, so we're blind too, are we? Yeshua answered them, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But since you still say we see, your guilt remains. They have a spiritual blindness. They have a blindness to who the Messiah is. And all of us at one point were blind. Maybe not in the physical realm, but we were blind into the things of God. And sometimes we can still be blind to the things of God. When we say we've arrived, and we know everything, we've got it all together, and in fact, we're blind. Yeah. I don't know about you, but the more I've studied, the more I do it. There was a time where I thought I knew stuff. Actually, the more and more I do it, more and more I don't know. The more and more I question. Maybe some of you know that feeling. So I say, I don't know. I don't know what God's doing. I don't know this. I don't know that. And it's a good thing. But let's look how he changes a little bit here. Because Yeshua, we just got a few minutes, and hopefully you read chapter 10, but I just read the first part. I want to read that again. And then I'm going to read a few more verses. In verse 6, it says in chapter 10, Yeshua used this indirect manner of speaking with them, but they didn't understand what he was talking to them about. So Yeshua said to them again, yes, indeed, I tell you that I am the gate for the sheep. All those who have come before me have been thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate. If someone enters through me, he will be safe and will go in and find pasture. The thief comes only in order to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come so they might have life in its full measure. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, since he isn't a shepherd, the sheep aren't his own, sees the wolf coming, abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf drags them off and scatters them. The hired worker behaves like this because it's all he is, a hired worker. So it doesn't matter to him what happens to the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life on behalf of the sheep. Also I have other sheep which are not from this pen. I need to bring them, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock, one shepherd. So that last part is obviously talking about Yeshua's. God's always had a mission to bring the non-Jewish people in, the Gentiles into the flock. It's always been his mission, not to have two separate things, two separate ways. It's always been one. He says he had a plan to do it. He's doing it. But I want to just read. We're only going to go a few more minutes. But Jeremiah chapter 2. You can read this later. It's a good chapter to study. Chapter 2, verse 35. You remember in chapter 2, Jeremiah is talking actually. It's interesting because he's actually talking to the ones who were in charge. But I'm just going to read for time's sake. It says, you say I am innocent. Surely he's no longer angry at me. Here I am passing sentence on you because you say I have done nothing wrong. You cheapen yourself when you change course so often. You'll be disappointed. And he goes on. We know Jeremiah talks about a lot. Later it talks in the prophets about the false shepherds, all of these kind of things. And Yeshua is saying, no, he's the true shepherd. What I wanted to bring out in Jeremiah was that when we say, I have done nothing wrong, we really cheapen ourselves. When we think we know everything, when we have it all together, we've got it all figured out, we're really cheapen ourselves on that. We need to be humble people. Our religious life usually does that to us. When we become, I've got everything figured out on the Sabbath, I have everything figured out on this, I know all the words, I know his name perfect, I know this perfect, I know this perfect, I know this. And we do it, and we look down upon others that might have a difference or aren't there yet. And that is a very dangerous thing. The whole thing should be pointed towards Yeshua. Yeshua is the shepherd, he's the sheep, he's the safe one. Everything should point to him. And we need to be very careful. This is why we're doing the Gospel of John now. This is why we do it, because many of us have been doing Torah for years and years and years, and we'll continue to do Torah. Torah is our life. But somehow, sometimes, the one who leads us, the one who opened our eyes to Torah, we get so involved that we forget the one who led us there. May we not do that. Yeshua is the center. Yeshua is the living Torah. We must see what he says about it. He is the door. If anything distracts us from that, if we find that there's another way to coming to the God without Yeshua through some form of whatever it may be, some form of religion, we must run from it. We must stay away from it. So he deals with all this in chapter 10. He goes with it. It's an interesting thing. We have the mention of Hanukkah in chapter 10, where he does that, and that'll be a whole thing by itself, where he deals with this. And then chapter 11 is a very important chapter that you've read it, where he raises, again, showing who he is, raises his Lazarus from the dead. I'm just going to read one portion from it so we can hear the word of God. In chapter 11, verse 21, Martha said to Yeshua, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Yeshua said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said, I know that he'll rise again at the resurrection on the last day. Yeshua said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever puts his trust in me will live even if he dies. And everyone living and trusting me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into this world. So we have to ask ourselves, do we believe this? Do we believe who Yeshua is? Do we believe that he's the resurrection and the life? And then if we trust in him, we will never die? This is a very important question that we need to ask ourselves. And Yeshua, obviously later they want to stone him again because he says, I am. He is divinity, he is divine. He says, I am, which they knew took him right back to Exodus of that. But he has life. And I'll say this as an application. For those we know, he rose Lazarus from the physical death. All of us have been dead. We're dead in sin. We've all been there. We're praying for people. These cards up here are people that we know, family members, friends that haven't had a relationship with the Lord or have walked away, and we're praying for them. Know that Yeshua is the answer. He's the one that rises from the dead. And if we're dead on the inside, you're just walking in this life, know that he can give you resurrection. He can give you a new life, a born-again experience, and create a new man, a new person inside of you, a new life. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, doesn't mean all that, but he is the resurrection and the life. So I'll close upon that. After this, if you want to pray, with someone, just afterwards stick around, find someone to pray with, all right? And crazy times, I just want to mention this. We all have to get our lives, we have to constantly, day after day after day, just make a decision to walk with the Lord. Yeah. And it really hit me this week because there's a man I work with. I even ate lunch with him for 12 years, and he's 45 years old. And last week he had a pain, he went to the hospital, and he died this week. 45 years old. And you just don't know when our time is coming. And I don't say this to scare people, it's the reality of it. We have to walk in Yeshua's light. We have to be with him. He is the light of the world. He's the only hope. So if you need prayer, get with someone. Don't walk out without doing that. So everybody's invited to Oneg afterwards. Please stick around in fellowship. Don't forget, 1 o'clock, we're going to get into Korach. We're going to get into Torah